Matt, welcome.
Hey, Ben, thank you.
I'm joined by Matt Kellerman, VP of Data Analytics at 66 Degrees. Matt, I'd love to have you give a little bit of your background and your scope of focus.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, Vice President of Data Analytics at 66. I've spent about 15 years in the industry. I built a background in technology solutions with analytics platforms, but where I found my passion was not just in the technology and what it's capable of, but how you can put technology to work to accomplish business outcomes. So it becomes more about what's the return on my investment, what value am I getting from this exercise, from this solution that really drives me in the industry.
Fantastic, and that's more needed now than ever in the world of AI and the world of data. Matt, we've worked together for a few years at this point, and gosh, has the world of analytics and BI changed a lot. Can you walk me through some of those changes and what's driving those changes in the world of business intelligence over the past few years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you consider what the definition of BI was, traditional BI like CPI, it's full of dashboards and subscriptions going to my email and a little bit of self-service in there, someone going out and running their own reports to get an answer to a data question, right? What we're starting to see is an evolution of that as you introduce AI into the tooling. You're starting to experience a lot of folks going down a crawl, walk, run, kind of framework. First, what we're seeing companies build comfortability with is simple data Q&A, right? There's a simple deterministic answer to, what was my sales yesterday, right? And being able to go out and ask a question as opposed to dig through 3 or 4 or 5 dashboards, to get these answers, is pretty efficient, right? It kind of revolutionizes somebody's job. Where we see folks now going as they've built this comfortability with its how to interact with it, what its accuracies look like. We start to see folks utilizing AI in BI to help with summarization, right? I've got this dashboard that's providing me a lot of information. I may not understand how to digest that information, right? So really describing how my business is working, right? What's happening to me. And then, I'll jump forward into that run stage, and we can talk more about this, but what's really folks are starting to think about, which is really exciting, where I enjoy digging into the solutions, is how can I extend AI and analytics to accomplish significantly more for me in terms of prescribing, well, not just what's happening, but why is it happening? How do I impact what's happening?
And say a little bit more that is that in analytics is, in that run stage, very, very clear, crawl, walk, run is really where we've come over the past few, double click if you can, not only just, having, a CFO and COO background, I've built a number of dashboards and this is, what I lived off of, but how do you unpack and how do you get to the why?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, some of the capabilities that analytics that BI is bringing to the AI space, is that structured approach, that deterministic approach to providing me an answer to 2 + 2 is 4, right? Math is math. I think where language models may struggle with determining the context of a large data set, with determining how to generate SQL against a potentially messy enterprise warehouse that provides results you're looking for. BI has been around for a long time. Semantic layers, there's technologies out there where semantic layers have existed for 25 years. And, these tools, these semantic capabilities have been interacting with databases and generating SQL that we trust, that's governed, that's secured, that entire time. So where BI really can provide value in this new agentic renaissance, right, is helping provide that structure to agents, allowing agents to actually interact with a semantic layer so that you're trusting technology that's been doing this for 25 years to query your data, to bring results back, that you can believe. And then letting the language model then interpret and summarize and interact with that result set. But then the language model is doing what the language model does best and allowing tools that have worked with SQL, for decades to continue to provide that value. One of the ways that I really see significant opportunity within organizations is thinking about prescription, right? So to answer your question, if you think about the how and you think about the why, you can utilize agents that are looking at your structured data to interact then with more reason-based models, with statistical models, with machine learning models that are looking at correlation, that are looking at anomaly detection, that are looking at forecasting, to be able to provide those data points as levers within those models and let the language model then interpret results that provide you more of a prescription of not just how something's happening, why it's happening, but what you can do about it, right? I'll expand on that a little bit to say, if you know, right, that to improve, I'll use an example of campaign performance. To improve campaign performance, I've got a set of levers, a set of parameters. I could provide, put more money into the campaign. I can open up more channels, buy more keywords, right? These types of things. If you know what those levers are and you know what the successful outcome looks like, right, higher revenue generated from these campaigns, then why not use agentic tooling to run through a series of simulations, right? Dynamically model each scenario, find which one is closest to or achieves my success criteria, and prescribe that to the end user. So an end user looking at a graph may recognize my campaign performance is down, but they may not know what to do about it. We can utilize BI in conjunction with agents to provide them with those next best actions that they can take. So rather than make a guess and have to wait a day, a week, a quarter before you can analyze those results, have a much more informed decision and plan for how you can approach your business.
That's really, really clear. It makes me think of a challenge that I'm running into pretty frequently at this point is, for the past decades, I've used dashboards to run our business, and to me and my CFO and then CEO. And what I'm using now more is agents to have conversations and to prepare for meetings, is to prepare for a conversation with our board or prepare for a conversation with our leadership team, to kind of pressure test to say, hey, how should we spend time in this meeting? But I'm running into a little bit of a roadblock with agents, and I'm putting in my dashboards. And they're either in Google Sheets or they're in a SaaS application. And I'm having an agent converse with me about this, but I'm still not quite getting to the pinpoint of the relationship between the data points that I want. And I've trained it pretty well, but I'm still underwhelmed by that agent's, a little bit of a surface level response. What would you say? How do you solve that?
Yeah, I think that's quite honestly where introducing elements of BI and those semantic layers or ontologies into your agentic framework would provide significant value, right? If you're providing an agent a large data set that you're leaving it up to the agent to interpret.
That's the case.
Yeah. So what you're really doing is you're trusting that agent also understands your business, also understands the relationships between these data concepts, and if you change one, how's it correlated to the other, right? Utilizing these semantic structures provide that instruction, that understanding that agents can lean on. So, the industry recognizes this. A lot of organizations, a lot of foundational data organizations have come together to say, hey, we're recognizing that the semantic layer that's traditionally more of a BI tool, it's providing over 30% efficiency increase above, text to SQL models that we're utilizing, right? It's creating an understanding of those business concepts and relationships in the data. It's helping us understand how to actually generate accurate results from the data. So being able to lean on that capability will provide significantly more context for those agents to provide the answers that are, sort of not quite there right now because it's missing that business understanding.
It's exactly what it is. And so, it's, if I read a dashboard and interpret the dashboard, I understand the concepts. I have the semantic layer, but if I'm just conversing with an agent right now, it misses. And so it's really something to keep in mind. Matt, we've talked about what's happened over the past few years. What's next? If I look out over the next year, the next few years for BI solutions, what's on the roadmap?
Yeah, so a little bit of what I alluded to there a moment ago, I think not just for prescriptive capabilities, but if you think about agents working together, right? An individual might work with an agent that's orchestrating a ton of what I'll call knowledge workers or knowledge agents behind the scenes. So, you have these specialized agents that are really good at understanding certain elements of your data, certain elements of your business, right? Agents that are really good at utilizing certain tools like running machine learning models off on the side or generating images or slide decks, right? By providing a mechanism to that whole agentic team to interact with structured data, to understand those business relationships, the outcomes that we're able to accomplish are going to be significantly more pointed, directed, appropriate to the types of questions that I'm asking, and able to provide that business context that oftentimes we find is lacking today.
It's becoming smarter about your business in many ways, and it allows the user to be smarter about his or her business as well. Matt, we're in the age of AI at this point, and as you have alluded to before about how we're serving our customers, that's also impacting us as 66 Degrees and how we're doing work. We're in the world of where we're delivering with agentic teams and using a solution of delivery agents called Paradigm. Could you talk about the shift in your team and how you're running your team and how you're delivering engagements right now?
Absolutely. It's a topic I'm incredibly passionate about these days. So I'll describe what analytics migrations looked like pre-agents, pre this AI renaissance, right? You would first, have to convince a CIO, a CEO that, hey, we need, to utilize this new BI platform because of XYZ capabilities or reasons, right? And you'd have to embark on a justification journey of, why do I take on this process that I know is traditionally, 1.5 to 3 years long? What value is it going to provide? What's it going to look like? You have to deal with the migration paralysis fears of what don't I remember? What don't I understand about the current implementation, right? What we have now is a capability through our Paradigm agents that from assessment of the ecosystem to planning, not just the technical planning of what the migration execution is going to look like, but also setting the stage and roadmap for how many people need to be involved, how long is it going to take, right? What's the actual total cost of ownership of doing this when I consider licensing, when I consider cost of migration, right? A lot of the things that cause pause yesteryear, to undertaking these large migrations, we're utilizing agentic team members to help extract metadata, to help assess, what the entire BI ecosystem currently looks like, to help assess what parity looks like, migrating those assets into another system, to help plan what is my roadmap, what does my total cost of ownership look like, what's the complexity, how many people do I need, how long is it going to take, right? And then to go beyond that, to actually executing the migration, to testing, and validating results coming from that migration is amazing. We've now taken a process that I mentioned could be 1.5 to 3 years and gone from a time scale of months and years to weeks to months.
And that's because of these agentic teams.
That's because of these agentic teams.
And what does that mean? How does the human and agent interact with one another? What is it? In your words, how would you define an agentic team?
Great question, yeah. So once upon a time, if I didn't have an agent team member helping me expedite this process, to extract the metadata, I'd have to write my own queries to interpret that metadata, to understand, what semantic structures exist, how does that correlate to the security constructs that I need as an organization, what is the networking, what does the security look like? All of that decisioning, I'd have to manually pull and determine how I want to address, right? That's just part of the assessment. Understanding then what it looks like to actually migrate and move that, an incredibly manual process where you might have used things like Excel sheets and calculators you've developed in the past to try and help you. We have agents that expedite outputting, this is what the complexity score of a migration looks like. These are how many people we're going to need. These is how long is it going to take. one of the most things I'm most passionate about. It's amazing what some of the technologies these days are able to accomplish. We're utilizing MCP servers that allow us to provide an image of a dashboard, or if I'm building a new dashboard, a description of what I'm trying to accomplish in business terms, in natural language. I can describe that to this agent, and the agent will produce a high fidelity dashboard for me that's 90% there. You know, my developer, all I have to do is go into the system now, and I'm looking at aesthetics, I'm looking at labels, I'm looking at resizing things. I'm not having to build that dashboard from scratch. So if you think about a migration where once upon a time I'm starting with a blank canvas and I have to produce the data sets, and I have to, well, first I have to produce the semantic layer, then I have to produce the data sets, then I have to produce the dashboards, right? Now, you know, a process that could have taken, you know, days to weeks to build a dashboard, I have a dashboard built in 25 seconds, and I'm, you know, playing with the aesthetics and sizing for maybe an hour or two, and I'm done, right?
What acceleration,
Yeah.
and what it's compressing time to value. You know, it's accelerating that. Matt, if I synthesize, you know, pieces of our conversation, you know, I'm assuming as we think about these large migrations, you know, from traditional BI systems to more modern BI applications and tooling, it seems like there's two reasons why you do this right now. Number one is you can't be caught in a traditional or legacy system. Is that doesn't give you the ability to converse with your data, ask why, ask, you know, so what? You know, what if I have this variable? It's very rigid, number one. But number two, what I'm hearing you say is the ability to get out of these legacy systems is better than ever at this point. Am I understanding those two reasons that we're creating more of a compelling event than ever for people to move off of these legacy BI tools?
We're creating a compelling event. We're creating a compelling reason, right? You know, the ability to do it quickly. But the problem that people need to be aware of is the risk of staying put, right? These legacy platforms that do not provide the same agentic capabilities, they're looking at consolidation into SaaS platforms, right? Many of the BI, continued legacy BI tools that are out in the ecosystem are all starting to push their customers into more of a SaaS model. Now, when you go into that SaaS model, license costs are increasing. So to offset that, they're trying to lock you into multi-year commitments. So the real risk here is if you stay, you know, you're already undertaking a migration. You're getting locked into a multi-year commitment on an old platform. So you're continuing to fall years behind the competition who are moving to these more agentic or AI-enabled tools, right? The risk here to me is what's going to happen to me if I don't move.
That's right. Yeah, you don't want to be caught in a long-term SaaS arrangement. So Matt, you know, I'm a CIO, you know, or a COO, and I want to move off my legacy platform to a modern BI tool, modern BI platform. What would you advise me, you know, for some of my preliminary considerations as I'm thinking about this, and then how do you go about executing this in a fashion that doesn't provide business risk, but allows me to have high user experience satisfaction from the people that I'm providing that data and insights to?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question. I'll answer it, you know, by saying we can invest tons of money, right? Hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in a data estate. We can invest millions of dollars, you know, in building out these amazing agents that help us move faster, that help us answer questions faster. But in the end, it's about the consumer of the data, right? The consumer of the information, the person making the business decision.
The person that CIO, if I'm the CIO or the CO, the person that I'm serving and that I want to offer up those insights to.
Exactly, and if they aren't comfortable with the platform, you know, if they don't understand it, if it's not easy to use, it doesn't solve a problem, you know, they're going to resist it. They're going to want to continue trying to use the tools that they're comfortable with, right? So what I would say to that CIO, that CEO that's trying to create this organizational change is ensure that the consumer is part of the discussion from the beginning. Organizational change management is incredibly important when you change how people work. So what we tend to do is when we're having these conversations about tooling, we're creating a baseline, right? We work with those business users to understand, what do you do today? What are the pain points you have with how you do things today, right? What could be better? What would make your job easier? What are the types of questions that you have about information? All of that goes into how we are creating and tuning these tools that they're interacting with. So they're our test case. They go in and we say, go ahead and give it a shot, right? Yeah, ask the questions, try and run your business using this. Once they see how easy it is, once they see how fast it is, once they understand its accuracy, right? You've created an evangelist. So now, rather than a resistant culture, that's concerned about the change, that's dreading it, you have people that are excited. You have people that want to participate. You have people that don't want to wait. They want to get their hands on it now, right? I think that creates the momentum, that builds confidence, not just in the organization, but for that CIO, that CEO, in the decision they're about to make.
That's really, really clear. And so instead of creating a push in the organization of the CEO or the CIO pushing that tooling on people, you're creating excitement of actually pulling.
That's right. That's right.
Now, my last question here, Matt, would be, if you're very clear on change management, by the way, and I think that's really critical. There's also a lot of change management, I'm assuming, that you're going through as a practice leader and a leader at 66 Degrees. Imagine I'm a young person wanting to start my career in BI and analytics, and thinking about the road to navigate ahead and the change that I'm going to need to go through. What would be your advice?
Ben, I'm super passionate about this. I think what we have experienced in our industry over the last 20 years that I've been around in it, is constant change, right? I think you go from structured SQL-based static reporting into an environment where there's lots of dashboards and visualizations and interaction that I can now take, into self-service where I can build and pull my own insights, into now this more AI-driven ecosystem where the system's actually prescribing to me and helping me understand my business, right? I think what's important is, don't focus on a single piece of technology. Focus on what that technology is enabling for you as an end user. Be curious. Stay ahead of the wave. Any new tool that comes out, any new capability that you see is generating excitement, be curious, prototype it, play with it, try and solve your own small problems so that you have that awareness and understanding as the market changes. You're able to lead that charge because of your awareness of the capabilities, because of your comfortability working with the technology to solve problems.
Yeah, you made it. Matt, your insight in this conversation have made me realize that, hey, BI isn't going away. Right. Business insights isn't going away. In fact, the world of business insights is probably bigger than a lot of us have given it credit for. Because if you can solve, hey, here's what I can do to change the results of my business, that's BI on steroids, right? That's what it was meant to be. And the advice you're giving to the practitioner is that become an expert. Tools are going to come and go. Tools are going to make your life easier, but become that expert. Become the advisor to the CFO or to the CEO, and then you're an expert in that field, and you will not be replaced by that tool.
That's right. You think about back to our earlier conversation, what I'm passionate about evolved from purely the technological capabilities, right? What can a system do to what can it accomplish for me, right? So if you understand the technology, but more importantly are passionate about how to apply technology to solving problems, then you're flexible, right? You're not tied to that single technology. What you're focusing on is business transformation, and business transformation will always be relevant.
Agreed. Matt, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thank you.